So, flight scheduled 7 a.m. the 6th. I received my test results by email on February 6th at 9:24 a.m. So, in case you're not following along, that means that I did not receive them in time for my 7 a.m. flight. And I had to leave the airport before, 7 a.m.-ish, knowing that, I wouldn't, like at that point I didn't have my results yet. And knowing that I had to be missing that flight and not having one because I had no results. Get home. Just about the time that I get home is about the time that I get the email that I now have my results. So, they were negative, of course. I don't know if it would have been a bigger slap in the face if they had been positive, but they were negative, but I, of course, missed that flight. So, of course, if that was the end of it, then this all would have ended last episode and I wouldn't be having a second episode. But, as you know, there must be more to the story. So, get on the email again, typing away. I missed my flight. Where do we go from here? Because I didn't have my test results, so blah, 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 blah. And they're like, okay, let's try to get a new flight. Try to reschedule your flight. But the latest that you can arrive, we have provisions in place in case, people have delays or anything like that. So it is possible to arrive in Korea later than February 7th, which is the main arrival date. It is possible. We know that things like this will happen, but the latest that you can arrive is February 9th. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And guys, it takes a long time to travel across the world, okay? A long time. So I had a flight for the 6th. I would arrive on the 7th, which was when I was supposed to. Now they're saying, okay, let's see what you can do, what you can find, but you can arrive no later than the 9th, okay? No later than the 9th. So you will be 2 days late. So I reschedule my flight. I find one. Well, reschedule. Yeah, I think it was still considered a rescheduling, but it's at a completely different airport and everything. Craziness, I know. The best I can get is the next day, February 7th. My flight is now early morning, afternoon of February 7th, and they are saying that I will arrive early morning, because the other one I believe was late night I would be arriving on the 7th, but now this one is arriving early morning on the 9th. Okay, so just about as late as it can be to arrive. And remember, everyone must do a 14-day quarantine when they arrive. They have a whole system set up for us EPIK teachers with a quarantine site. So we wouldn't be quarantining through the government had a way. If you were traveling to South Korea in general, you could quarantine through the government, or you could quarantine through your own home as long as you had proof of residence and proof of your own bathroom or something like that. Their whole COVID tracking system and quarantine system and everything is extremely controlled and detailed. It's not just oh yeah, well you shouldn't go anywhere for 14 days. No, it's literally you install apps on your phone that track you and that you have to log into every single day and input your temperature and all this kind of stuff. It's very serious. But they kept their COVID way more under control than places like America did. So the EPIK people had acquired like 2 different places where EPIK applicants would be quarantining. So everyone is like quarantining in the same building, like either a hotel or a dorm. And you would have your meals provided and stuff like that. And you would have transportation to the quarantine site and everything. But so everyone had to do 14-day quarantine. And so now I will be arriving 2 days later, which means I'll be exiting quarantine 2 days later. And after quarantine, you're supposed to go directly from quarantine, like everyone gets on a bus and they go directly to orientation, because normally the EPIK program, you arrive in Korea, everyone pretty much arrives at the same time on the same day, and then they all take a bus from the airport to orientation, and they have, I believe it used to be a 10-day orientation, and then you all spread out across the country to whatever province or city that you end up being assigned to, and you meet your co-teachers and go to your schools and blah, 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 blah. This is not about all of the intricacies of that, but it's important information to know, I guess. So now, because of COVID, the 10-day orientation that EPIK had everyone go to, mandatory, they cut it down to 5 days. And then they also had us during quarantine, we had multiple video lectures that we were supposed to watch. So we had about 5 days worth of video lectures and then 5 days of in-person orientation that would be taking place after quarantine. But I'm arriving 2 days late to quarantine, so then I'm exiting quarantine 2 days late and therefore missing 2 of those 5 days of orientation, just so that we have some context. And also, so I'm like skipping forward, but I haven't even gotten on my first flight yet. That was all just for context of the timeline. So we now know I've just gotten my COVID test results. Those are only good for 72 hours. So there was the timeline that EPIK had. You can't arrive later than 2 days because that's going to like snowball into all of these other things that you're going to be late for. So that's understandable that they would do that. But then also my COVID test results are only going to be good for so long. So I can't really delay my trip in that sense either. So I get the best that I can, which is like afternoon the 7th, arriving early morning on the 9th. So it is the 7th now. I'm arriving at the airport. I'm checking it and going through all the blah, 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 blah. May I also note, it's not relevant to anything except for if you maybe want to think of like stress levels. I've never flown before. And I've never traveled to a foreign country before besides Canada. But anyway, so I'm at the airport, check in, blah, 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 do all that. Board the flight. Flight 1 of 3. You get on a small flight to go to like a bigger airport, and then that airport flight is like sort of like a big flight that goes to another airport, and then that's an international flight that's like a really big plane and really, really long flight. So there are 3 flights. I get on the plane for the first tiny plane, first flight. We're on the plane. Get off the plane. They say, okay, everyone, you need to deboard. We need to call in a mechanic. The bathroom is not working. There's one bathroom on this plane and it doesn't work, and we can't take off without a working bathroom. It's like against, air laws or something. We can't do it. Even though it's a short flight, you probably all would be fine if you just didn't go to the bathroom. No. Everyone get back off the plane until the mechanic gets here. Okay. Get back off the plane. Then they give everyone they pass out a little card to everyone with a number on it and say, call this number. if you need to reschedule your flight. I'm obviously freaking out. I don't know if I need to reschedule my flight or if it's possible. So I call the number and I tell them the situation, and they say, "You'll probably be fine. You shouldn't change your flight. Just get on that flight when it's ready, and you'll make it to the next one. Don't worry." So I say, okay, I'm gonna wait, and keep crossing my fingers. So they have a new boarding time now and a new landing time. The new landing time is 4:31 p.m. My next flight is said to depart at 4:45 p.m. Doesn't seem like I'll make it to me, but this is a connecting flight, so I'm wondering, maybe in situations like this, I've never flown before. So I'm thinking, well, maybe in situations like this where it's like a connecting flight and like one of the flights that was a connection was like delayed, and there's going to be a lot of people that are missing that flight. Like maybe they just, delay, and that's why flights could be delayed sometimes. Like maybe they delay that next flight a little bit because they know the other people are right about to get there, So I have no choice, obviously, but to get back on the plane when they say, okay, everyone's boarding again. We get back on the plane, fly, land the plane at 5:09 p.m. And apparently the connecting flight took off at 5:06 p.m. So I missed it by 3 minutes. Well, if, they would even let us board when it was like right about to take off. But also, that doesn't really even matter that it was that close, because we land at 5:09, but do we exit the plane at 5:09? No, of course we don't. Because they have to call the mechanic again, because now there is a jet bridge problem. They cannot get the jet bridge to connect to whatever it connects to. I don't know if the jet bridge is our part on the plane or if it's the part at the airport, but basically the way that you like walk through like to get on and off the plane, like the little tunnel thingy to get on and off the plane, we were not connected to that in any sense. Like if they opened the doors to the plane, we'd be like jumping out onto the ground, like they couldn't get us connected properly so that we could walk off of and out of the plane for like a while. I don't remember how long, but like we were sitting on that plane for quite a while I am wondering, because I didn't know at the time, I'm wondering like, am I missing my flight right now? Did it get delayed? Like what's going on? Finally, they fix the problem. They let us all get off the plane, and they tell us as we're getting off the plane, if you had a connecting flight, go to the desk and have them reschedule. So I go to the desk along with quite a few other people, and what the man ends up telling me, like his solution for me is, this is the best that he can do to get me into Korea on no later than the 9th. The best he can have me do is wait all night and have my next flight going out at, I think like 6 or 6:30 or something in the morning. And, would you like me to book you a hotel? And at this point, I'm thinking, no, I don't want to be leaving this airport in this place that I've never been in before, in this I don't want to like sail the airports and have there be like a path of like where I traveled. But obviously I went from a smaller airport to a larger airport, so now I'm at a large airport in a very dangerous city, and I don't really want to deal with getting all of my luggage that I've packed for an entire year's worth of stay. I don't want to take all of those bags and luggage and leave the airport into the dangerous city for the night and then have to go back to the airport in the early morning and deal with all my bags and recheck in and re-go through security. And not to mention, I have no clue how any of that works with my COVID test results, because I sort of checked into the system and the process with my COVID results being set within 72 hours. But then if I leave the system, quote unquote, like what happens then? So I was like, no, I will stay here all night. That is what I'm doing. And so that, we know it was 5 p.m. And I probably boarded around 5 a.m. to get on that 6-something flight. So I was there for a good bit of time. There was pretty much no one was flying at the time for fun. It was people flying for work and for, necessary reasons. At this time of COVID, like people weren't really flying just to like travel. And I wasn't I was flying to go to a job, obviously. But, so that first part where I was in the airport pretty much had no one. And then I obviously needed to get food. So I walked down to where all the restaurants were, to get some McDonald's, and there was like 1,500,000 bajillion people there. And it was really jarring. And I was like, what the heck? This is the most people I've seen in like a year, because I obviously didn't go anywhere during COVID. And then though, as the night wore on, it got to the point where I was like the only person there. Like there were some cleaning people that were cleaning the bathrooms and stuff, like some janitors that would like wheel their carts down the halls and stuff. But for the most part, I was like literally the only soul that I saw the entire night, which was kind of crazy. I would imagine when the airport is running at its normal capacity, even when it's, completely nighttime, there might be some people here and there, but it was so dead. Absolutely no one. So I just was chilling the entire night, get on my next flight. And I think that flight, I don't think that there was many issues with it. I was supposed to be sitting alone, like with no one sitting next to me. Because back then there was they were doing there was a seat empty, like a seat blocked off between every person. If it was a flight that had 3 seats in a row, and then if it was a flight that had 2 seats in a row, it was like one side had both seats, and then there was no seat, and then window seat. So it was like person, aisle, blocked off seat, window seat, if that makes sense. So it's like, for the most part, I was supposed to kind of be like still socially distanced from people, but then like at the last second, they like assigned extra seats to people, and someone sat next to me, and I had chosen the window seat, but they took the window seat. And obviously, I was so like just dead / demoralized at that point that I wasn't going to say anything anyway, but also they were like old and stuff. So I was like, whatever, you probably just didn't understand where your seat actually was, and you just checked the row or something and not the letter or whatever, however it works. And so I had to sit in the aisle seat, even though that technically wasn't my seat. So that kind of didn't go well, but it was fine. So I still had 3 flights total, but it was supposed to be like airport to airport. Like basically my connecting flight that I missed was taking me to one airport, but now this new flight was actually taking me to a different airport. And the other airport, I had like looked at the map of it and found my, my terminal and my gate and all those things. Like I was like knowledgeable about that airport. Like I studied it beforehand, but now this new airport that I was flying to, I didn't know about it yet. So that was another added stress, because it was like, okay, now I'm getting on a new flight at a new airport that I didn't even know I was going to be going to. But I get there and we wait, and that's the one that's going to be the international flight. So they had extra checks that they had to do for us then, like they were checking our visa and our temperature and those sorts of things. But then we get on that flight as well, and I'm pretty sure that one also went fine, except I hated literally all of the food. I am an extremely picky eater, and they kept giving me stuff that was just grotesquely disgusting. Like, even down to, like, we got little pints of ice cream with one of our meals, and it was like Ben and Jerry's ice cream or something, or Haagen-Dazs, I don't remember. But like the pint that they gave me was cherry with like cherry bits in it, which I absolutely hate. I'm sorry, it's disgusting to me. Like the skin of the cherry, I hate it. And maybe there's like, if you just tell the flight attendants like, oh, could I switch this for like another kind or something, then it's fine. But, I didn't know about any of that. And I was, like a walking dead person at that point. So like, how many hours are we into this now? I don't even know. But like, I left on the 7th and it's now the 8th. Like, I left the morning of the 7th to start my journey, and now it's the morning of the 8th. So it's already been 24 hours. And we have like I think around 12-hour flight that I'm on right now. Well, this ice cream thing is happening. And it gets a little confusing because of the time change. So like, I'll be arriving on the 9th in Korea, but it's because there's a time change. So that's kind of confusing, but it's not very important. But yeah, so I think for the most part, nothing else really happened with the flight or anything. And we finally land. And now, previously, I was mentally prepared to be landing sort of with other EPIK people. Like, all of the EPIK people are arriving pretty much around the same time and the same day. And you're going to like be running into other people. So like, if you're lost or confused, there's going to be like people there to help. But because I was arriving 2 days later, I was like the only EPIK person, and there was a million checks to go through at this airport. Like, obviously immigration, visa checking, COVID, quarantine, like all of these different checkpoints of, they want to make sure, just like, because you're an international traveler, but also you're traveling there for a job, but also you need to do the quarantine. And also like, so they have a whole big winding line of checkpoints that you need to be going through. And apps you're downloading on your phone for all these different things. And it was crazy. They kept asking me if I was military, and I'm like, no, I am with EPIK, but you had all of the EPIK people arriving through your line 2 days ago, not today. But it's okay. It all went well. But the thing is because of all of those different delays, and because I took such a later flight, like connecting flight, before we had known I was going to be arriving at the Incheon airport, which is the Korean airport that I was landing at, the biggest one in Korea. The Incheon airport, before I was arriving early morning, like 5 or 6 a.m. But now, because of all those delays, I actually landed around 2:30 p.m. And they had said like the hard cutoff was going to be like 4 p.m. They're like, you cannot arrive later than 4 p.m. at that airport. You're just not going to have enough time. Because you have to get to the quarantine site, and the quarantine site closes, quote unquote. Like, they won't accept you as like starting your quarantine day if you arrive later than 6 p.m. So I arrived around 2:30 p.m. at the airport. I obviously have to collect my luggage and go through all of those checkpoints and setting up of things, and they're calling the quarantine site to verify that I, am expected there, and they're calling all of these different places and things. And Finally, I get to the end of their line. The end of their line is, you need to quarantine. Like, this isn't, you don't get to just roam freely through the airport at this point, like at this level of COVID. You were ushered through, lines and checkpoints the whole way. And so you get to the end of it, and the end of it is, you need to be quarantining. How are you going to be quarantining? And you tell them the place you're going to be quarantining at. And they say, okay, you need to take a quarantine taxi to that location, which I knew and I was prepared for. And they gave me a note that I had printed out in Korean to hand to the taxi driver to tell him what he needed to do and where he needed to take me. So I tell this to the man, okay, I'm going to take the taxi. And he's like, okay, you have 4 options. And then he says all the names of the options and all of the prices of them. And he says, pick one. And I'm like, and he has this little board that has the information written out on it. And I'm like, does it matter? Which, is there a difference? And he's like, just pick one. And I'm like, why are you being so weird right now? It was so weird and jarring to me. I was like, you have to try and understand how much of a brain fog I was in at this point, pretty much, of lack of sleep, lack of food, stress, confusion, and all that. And so he's just basically just standing there smiling, pick one, pick one of the taxis. And so I'm just like, okay, that one. And I pick one. And then it's like in one of those movies or something where they pull down the curtain behind them and it shows the whole audience that's been watching the whole time, and you just said something behind someone's back, and then they're when the curtain falls and it shows everyone's standing right there and they've been watching you, and you're like, oh my God, now I understand why that person was being so weird. Because he turns around and my vision widens and I see that behind him is a slew of taxi drivers that have all been chilling back there. And he calls to one of them. He says their name, and that dude hops up and he's like, oh, okay. And basically I needed to pick which taxi service I would take. And he was basically just telling me, their name and their price. And I'm not going to sway you either way. You just have to pick one. He's like, I'm not selling them to you. I just flat out tell you what they are and pick one. And then we call them up and you go with them. It was very, very surprising that I was not prepared for that situation, but, that's how it went. And because you had to take a special quarantine taxi, you had to take a taxi that was set up to be going from the airport to designated quarantine sites that had plastic barriers set up between the driver and you and everything. So the taxi man was very nice. He did not understand anything that I was saying in English, but I gave him my note. He understood it perfectly. He was so helpful. And we did have some things that we communicated to each other without understanding at all. I could tell that he was, when we stepped outside, I could tell that he was saying whoa, aren't you cold? Where's your jacket? And so I tried to gesture to him oh, it's sitting in I had a luggage carrier thing, and it was piled in the top part of that underneath my other bag. And so then I go to reach for it there, and then he's like, no, a coat, don't you need a coat? I could tell that's what he was saying because of his motions. And so then I'm like, no, just wait a second and you'll see. And I pull, I grab to pick the coat up, and he's like, oh. And so it all worked out. He ended up actually having to call someone to translate things to tell me, because there were some things we couldn't figure out, but he was great. But that doesn't mean that the taxi ride was great. So Well, first of all, I'll also like side mention that going into this, I knew how to read Korean and write Korean, but that doesn't mean I knew how to understand Korean. Like I knew some basic phrases and I knew like a whole slew of random words. But I didn't know like I wouldn't say that I could speak it in any capacity. But if there was like a sign that says taxi and it sounds like taxi in English, I would be able to tell. Like there's a lot of words that sound, if you sound out the Korean, it sounds like an English word. And so you can tell. Things like that I could do. But anyway, so we get in the taxi. The dude knows where he's going to take me. Where he's going to take me is not directly to the quarantine site. Where he's going to take me, which is what the note says, is to a COVID testing site. Wait for me to get COVID tested and then to quarantine, because that is another thing that I had to do. When I arrived in Korea, before I quarantined, I needed to get tested again, because the way that the 14-day quarantine worked at this time was you had to get a test at the start of your 14-day quarantine, and then you had to get a test at the end of your 14-day quarantine. And so for people that arrived the day that they were supposed to arrive, which was the 7th, they had COVID testing prepared for everyone at the quarantine site. So everyone just went from the airport straight to the quarantine site and then got called down to get a COVID test done by someone that was like brought like in-house, But I missed that because I wasn't there that day of quarantine. So I had to go to a normal COVID testing center and get a COVID test done before I entered the quarantine myself. So the taxi man knows this and he knows where to take me. So we're on our way there. It's around 3:30 at this point. It took me an hour to get through all of the airport checks. So it's 3:30, we're in the car, and he's on his way to take me to the COVID testing site when he starts to try to tell me that there's some sort of problem. But I can't understand what he's trying to tell me. And so he ends up having the brilliant idea to call a place that has an English translator, and he tells her and then gives his phone to me, and I listen to her tell me what he was trying to tell me, which was that we are stuck in a traffic jam. And he called and called and I sat there while he was on all of these phone calls on his speakerphone, making all of these different calls to places and seemingly getting bad news, because he called and called around to all of the different COVID testing sites that he could know of, and look up and everything. And they were all saying, we close, or we're closed. You won't get to us in time. And this is in Seoul, by the way. So I was not teaching in Seoul. I was teaching in Gwangju. But you arrive at Incheon Airport and you go to they had 2 quarantine facilities. One was in Seoul and one was in, I don't remember the other place, but I was stationed at the Seoul quarantine site. So he is in a traffic jam at 3:30, 4 o'clock-ish in Seoul, and cannot find any COVID testing site to take me to, because the problem was, if we remember, the quarantine site closes for like new entries at 6 p.m. So he has no time to get me to a COVID testing site and have me get back out of it and then get to the quarantine site by 6. So finally, he conveys this information to me via the other lady, and we're all on the same page that he's like, I cannot take you to the COVID test. I can only take you straight to quarantine. And so at this point, I am like, like literally cannot keep my eyes open. Like I think my body and my mind were like failing me. Like I was shutting down from the stress, I think, or something, but also just tiredness. But it got to the point where, you know, we all knew that was what was happening. And so I was literally starting to fall asleep in the taxi, like could not keep my eyes open. Like I looked like Boo from Monsters, Inc. Like eyes slowly opening and shut. And then the taxi man started to sing, and not like happy jovial singing, like peaceful singing, almost like a lullaby. But we finally, like, we get to the COVID testing site, and it was my understanding that he told we did not get to the COVID testing site. That would have been great. We get to the quarantine site, and it was my understanding that he told the people at the quarantine site my situation. And I get there, I get to the quarantine site, like, at 6. Like, they're, like, rushing me. They're like, hurry, like, come in, like, put this hand sanitizer on your hands, and then take this pen, and sign this paper, and then, do you want dinner? And then blah, blah, blah. Like, they were trying to, like, get me, like, into my room as fast as physically possible, because it was, like, literally the last second that I could have entered, I guess. And these are, like, old dudes. And yeah, I thought that the taxi driver had sort of said to them that was what happened. But then I get in there, and they're, like, you know, shoving the hand sanitizer at me, like, hurry, use this hand sanitizer. And then they're like, take this pen and, like, sign this paper. And I'm like shaking my hands, like, you know, like, dry my hands, because I needed to, like, show them my documents and stuff. And then they're like, oh, okay, like, you know, no, just calm down, like, take your time, it's all good. Like, once they saw, like, how rushed they were being, and, like, how rushed it seemed, they were like, oh, you know, never mind, like, it's fine, let your hands dry. But what they wanted me to sign was a paper that was saying, like, you know, I attest that, like, you know, I got my COVID tests done and I'm entering the quarantine or whatever. And I'm like, I didn't get my COVID test done. And they're like, yeah, just sign the paper that you got your COVID test. And I'm like, I didn't get my COVID test done. And it was this whole big confusion thing. So I ended up just signing it because I'm like, they don't understand that I'm telling them that I didn't do it. So I sign it. I go up to my room, and then I have to, of course, email my coordinator again to tell them, hey, we were stuck in a traffic jam. So I arrived you know, all my flights were delayed, blah, blah, blah. I think I had been keeping them updated on all of that. And then it's like, okay, yeah. And then also we were stuck in a traffic jam, so I couldn't get COVID tested. And so I just arrived at the quarantine site, but I'm pretty sure they think that I did get COVID tested. So then the coordinator's like, okay, I'll let them know that you still need to go and get a COVID test. Then obviously I drop dead, but, you know, drop dead to sleep. And then I don't even know if I noticed at that point or if I noticed the next day, but there was no working fridge in my room because it had apparently been left unplugged, and grew molds or mildew or whatever in it because I opened it and I was like, so I didn't have a fridge. It was a dorm room. So I didn't have a fridge, but there was no microwave either. Nothing for, like, it had its own bathroom with a shower. It was a double room, technically, so there were 2 beds. I only needed 1, but, like, 2 beds, 2 desks, 2 chairs, and a window, and a mini fridge that did not work. So I had, like, no like, appliances of any kind. I had a kettle because they gave you, like, a sort of a part of you had to pay for the quarantine, and part of the money cost went towards, they gave you some ramen and some, like, a kettle and some towels and stuff like that, and, like, some travel soaps and stuff. Because it would be hard to prepare for 14 days of quarantine when you're flying internationally to, you know, like, they were giving you all of your meals, but, like, it would be hard to carry enough things that would be what you would need for 14 days of quarantine. So there were those things, but no working fridge, and also no heat. And remember, this is February 9th in Seoul. And I had no working heat in my room. There were rooms that had working heat, but not mine. Because there was like a chat room for all of the people in quarantine. So you could hear about what all the other people were talking about and what was in their room and blah, blah, blah. So, my room had no heat, no fridge. I go to sleep. The next day, how did it work? So there was a chat. They also gave you, so Kakao is an app that people use in Korea for messaging. It's a messaging app that I had and that everyone was encouraged to have and download. And that's where the chat room was for the quarantine people. And also they gave you, they told you to enter a chat room where you could chat with one of 4 people that were in charge of this quarantine site if you had any problems. And so I chatted to one of those people saying, I need to get a COVID test. And basically between talking to them and getting no response and then messaging a different one, and then they asked for my room number and then getting no response, and also talking to my EPIK coordinator, I don't remember who it was through, but someone there says, you'll be contacted on the 10th. So the next day, you'll be contacted about getting COVID tested. Don't worry. I never get contacted on the 10th. So it's late day on the 10th. And I'm like, hello, once again, could someone please acknowledge my presence and my existence? Why does this always happen to me? And so basically my EPIK coordinator is okay, we're going to contact them again and really make sure, because you have to get tested within the next day. If you don't, that's going to be bad. Your quarantine's going to be invalid, basically. So finally, on the 11th, I think it's kind of hard to tell because when I try and look back at the dates of messages and stuff, everything has changed back to non-Korean times, if that makes sense. Even in it's I'm not in Korea right now. That's why I'm telling this story. So I took pictures on my phone and they had dates of when they were, Christmas. I took a picture on Christmas and it said Christmas when I was in Korea because it was on Christmas in Korea. But then my phone changed back to an American time zone when I came back here. And it took all of the dates and times and converted them to American times. It looks like I got tested on the 12th, but I think it was actually the 11th. But now it looks like it's the 12th for me now because my times got converted again or something. I don't know. It's kind of confusing and kind of complicated, but it doesn't really matter that much. Basically, at pretty much the last possible moment, someone comes and knocking on my door and is like, you didn't get a COVID test? And I'm like, yeah, I did not get a COVID test. And so he had to escort me out of the quarantine site, which was a dormitory, through their campus greens. I don't know what you'd call it, campus grounds. And then through some streets of Seoul, we walked to an outdoor COVID testing site and I got COVID tested. And then he escorted me back. So I actually got to leave quarantine 2 times, but, not having any real interaction of any kind, just being very carefully escorted. So 14 days of quarantine goes on. The food was left outside of our door at specific times, 3 times a day. And then we went and brought it in, and it was always cold. Not even this, is maybe 5 minutes from being hot. No, cold. Because remember, it was February. And so it was sitting out, they had to prepare hundreds of meals and then distribute them. So, they didn't prepare the meals. I think maybe the college did or something, the university, or maybe they got them from a service. I don't know. But they were clearly, catered little, boxes of meals, but they were all like, regardless of whether or not I liked the type of food, it didn't really matter because they were all like absolutely cold, and I had no way to heat anything up for 14 days. And I also had no heat in my room just in general. So the only time that I would warm myself up was when I took a shower. But you know, it's fine, whatever. This video is not about quarantine and my quarantine experience. So quarantine passes, you know, we get through it. And on, I think like the second to last day, we have to leave and be escorted again to get our exit COVID test, because the other people, the majority of the quarantine people, like the hundreds of people that were in quarantine on the right days, once again, someone visited the quarantine site and mass tested all of them. And then the people went back up to their rooms. But then there were about 6 of us that were late arrivals. So, you know, I was the latest arrival, I believe. 2 days late at 6 p.m. So I don't think you could possibly have entered later than that. But apparently there were 6 other people that arrived late enough to not be included in that other testing. So all 6 of us were escorted by a man again to a COVID testing site on like the day before we were to be exiting quarantine. And we got COVID tested again. They were negative. Very good. Yay. And now I've been in Korea for 2 weeks, but I've been in a dorm room and not left the room. But now it's time for us to go to orientation. But because we are missing the first 2 days of orientation, that means we missed the day that they had the medical checks, because that is yet another thing that you are required to do through EPIK. You need to get a medical check done when you enter into Korea. And for all of the people at orientation, to make it easier, it's brought to them. So like there were 2 orientation sites, and on I think the first or second day of orientation, everyone went through a medical check like at the orientation site. But because there were 6 of us that were, you know, not there on that day, we had to go to an actual hospital and get a medical check done. So we all load onto the bus with an EPIK representative that has come to collect us. We get on a bus and we travel to a medical center and are handed off to some other man. And he gets us through our medical check, which is a whole nother situation. But nothing really went wrong with that. And it's actually incredibly impressive how quickly they could do how many tests they did on us 6 people when it was as busy as it was. But we were getting like VIP treatment, like cutting lines. Like we got to, like, this man was like, he was like, had a mission. He's like, follow me, like go this way, sit down here, sign this paper, hand it to this person, get your blood drawn, now go to this sitting area, and like just like a well-oiled machine, fine-tuned, getting all 6 of us to each little checkpoint spot, getting our med check done. Thankfully, once again, nothing went wrong there. Now we're going to the orientation sites. Now the thing is, 2 different orientation sites, and it just so happens that 4 of the 6 of us got off at the first orientation site, which is not the one that I was getting off at. So there's me and 1 other girl. The unexpected thing is that the EPIK coordinator also got off at the first orientation site stop. So she basically says, peace, the bus driver is going to take you to your other orientation site, but I'm staying at this one. So now it's just 2 of us on a bus, just hoping we get to wherever we're supposed to get to, like, alone. Very weird, but the bus driver knows what he's doing. He takes us to our site. It's far out of Seoul. We were not it was hours to go to this other orientation site. We get there, we drop us off, we get inside, and then stand around for forever because no one once again will acknowledge our presence. You would think people would know that they were expecting more people, but it took random, like, what would you call them? I don't know. Like, there were people that work for EPIK, but then there are all of the people that are like, like us, like people that are attending the orientation. It took some of those people, like, walking through the halls because they were like, oh, like, we're going down to dinner or something. This was at a hotel, by the way. So I quarantined in a dorm room, but the orientation was at a hotel, and I actually got like a huge, like, suite to stay in for 3 days. Well, like 2.5 days. But they, like, no one was coming to help us or tell us anything. And so then some of the people saw us and started talking to us, and they were like, oh, did you want me to go and find someone, like, the EPIK people? And we're like, yeah, if you could do that, that'd be great. And so then finally they wander over to us and they're like, oh, wow, we're so glad you people made it. Your rooms are, here. That gave us keys to our room. And they were like, and it's dinner time right now. So, like, here's your handbook, and, like, you should probably go and get some dinner and put your stuff in your room. And we're like, okay. And so I went up to my room, I put my stuff away, and then I went and found where to eat, and they were still, like, tail end of the dinner. It was like buffet style, so, like, I just could, like, grab some stuff, but it was all kind of cold and picked over. But then I go back up to my room, and I'm like, am I going to get any more information or any help from these EPIK people, or are they just going to let me rot here? Like, what's going on? Because part of what you have to do during orientation is make a lesson plan and then present your lesson to all of the other people in your, like, little subset group. And I, had missed the first 2 days, and the presentations for your lesson plans were the next morning. And so I have to, after, a little while of wondering, like, were they going to help me at all or tell me anything else? Because I asked before that, when I was like, I'm going to be arriving late, so what does that mean in terms of orientation? Like, what's going to go on with that? And my EPIK coordinator was kind of just like, oh, we'll have to see. We'll have to let you know. Like, we'll play it by ear and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, that's not very helpful for my sanity, but okay. So then I figured once he, like, saw and knew that I was there, that he would then update me, but he didn't. And so I had to email again. So am I going to be doing a presentation tomorrow with a lesson plan? Like, what's going on with that? And what response do I get? Yes, you will still have to. Because, like, attending orientation is, sorry if you can hear my chair making noises. Attending orientation was a required step in the EPIK process, and doing a lesson plan was a required step, like presenting one. These were things that you sort of, like, had to do because of EPIK. And so they're like, you know what? Yeah, you do still have to do it. And they're like, and you do have a partner assigned to you. So would you like us to go and bring you to her now so that you guys can meet and, like, work on it, because it's tomorrow morning that you have to present. So I'm like, okay, yeah, of course. Yeah. Let me just grab my computer or whatever, like, and, take me to her. Let's go. So we go knock on her door. Oh, hi, blah, blah, blah. Here's your partner. So if you guys want to make a whole lesson plan and practice it and be prepared to present it to a whole group of people tomorrow morning, go on ahead. And so I will just say very simply that my partner was, like, clearly everyone else that was at orientation. So we got divided into groups. So I was in the Gwangju group. Like all of the people that were going to Gwangju to teach in Gwangju, that's a city in Korea, and it was my choice of where to go. But I was so early in my application process that I got to have my choice. It's a large city. And so all the people that were going to be teaching in Gwangju were like separated together. But in general, all of the people at orientation have all been attending different like lectures and classes together for the past 2 days and have been working on their project together and stuff. So people sort of paired off naturally, you know, they're like, oh yeah, you know, maybe they sat next to each other on the bus, or maybe they were in line with each other at the med check or something. And so they sort of knew people and they made friends and they partnered up accordingly. And the person that I was paired with didn't have a partner, you know, like they were basically, it's like saying they were the last person picked in gym class, you know, like just in the most blunt terms, like obviously it makes sense that like the one that would get paired up with, everyone paired up until there was only one person left because they were missing the other person, which was me, you know? So with no more like judgment towards that person, I'll just put that out there that I was paired with someone that through like natural processes did not get a partner. But we worked on our lesson plan all night and had it ready and then presented it the next day. And the man that was sort of like overseeing the presentations and was giving feedback to each group, well, each pair afterwards did say to us, you know, I heard that you two, or that you, like to me specifically, like just arrived last night. So like all things said, what you guys did was very impressive for having done it in that short amount of time. So like, was our lesson the best? No, but we barely had any time to work on it at all. So that is the lesson plan portion of orientation. Now, there is still one more day of orientation. Well, throughout this, like that wasn't the only thing that happened that day. There was also some other lectures and stuff. They teach you about like, like culture of Korea and like what you should expect and like how to work, like how to teach this sort of class, like how to teach an online class and blah, blah. All like, it's just little like seminars for you to get some extra information before you start actually teaching. And at the end of all of that, they're like, okay, it's on the last day, you're going to meet with the EPIK person for your specific city or district or whatever. So like Gwangju people, you're going to meet with the Gwangju representative and they're going to help you with your bank papers and your phone papers and stuff. And then you guys are all going to travel on a bus together to Gwangju and then to the bank and all that sort of stuff and start getting everything set up. And then you will finally go to your individual schools when your co-teacher picks you up and, you know, be set on your way. So the co-teacher is basically, it's like the Korean teacher that is in charge of helping you while you are in Korea with all things like your banking and things like that. They work for the school that you work for. Like you guys work together, you're co-teachers. So it's on that last day. I'm in the room with the other Gwangju people. We're getting ready to get on our bus to leave, and it's at that time that we are told, and by we I mean the few of us that are teaching at English centers in Gwangju, not just a regular school position, but an English center position. It is at that point that we find out by the EPIK coordinator, English center people, we actually can't help you with this. So you just sit and listen while we help everyone else, because you're not actually a part of EPIK anymore. You are like independently contracted by your school. So when I started the process thinking, oh yeah, it's not like I'm finding my own job, my own way in this place, that's on the other side of the world or something. I'm going through a program that, they helped with the application process and they helped with finding the jobs, and then they set you up with a school, but also like if you ever have any problems, you can talk to your EPIK coordinator, you can talk to your EPIK representative, and they will help sort those problems out. Not if you are one of the few people that was hired as an English center teacher. But did they tell you that? No. So now you're just finding out right before you're embarking on your trip to your city that you are not going to have any more attachment to EPIK, and you are going to be on your own, and they cannot help you with anything that you previously would have been expecting them to help you with. So yeah, we sat there while they helped everyone else fill out their bank papers, and then we get on another bus, we ride another hours and hours of trip to get to Gwangju, and yada yada yada. We're at the what would it be called? The Center of the Gwangju Education Center or something. I don't remember what those places are called anymore. But we're at some place that has to do with, kind of like the education department of the city. Because EPIK has like an office there. And so that's where they drop everyone off, and everyone waits there for their individual co-teachers from their individual schools or establishments to come and collect them. And so I, of course, was at least not the last, but the second to last person to be picked up by my co-teacher. She thought that we were like doing things at that place, and like we had like a day of activities, and so she's like actually waited to pick me up until later. But then I told her like, oh, we just got there, and then we had a little bit to eat, and then we just waited for people to start getting picked up. But so she picked me up, and then because of how late it was when she picked me up, we barely had enough time to visit the school and for me to sign my contract and everything, because we had to get the contract, like the real contract, now the finally official one, not the placeholder one that we had so long ago. Had to get the official contract signed so that we could bring that to the bank, because that's the only way that I could get my bank started to be set up, is if I had that. And so we have to rush, and we get to the bank and get everything set up. It's fine. Finally, I get home late at night to my apartment. I call it home, but I had never entered there before in my life. She drops me off and is basically like, sorry, the last person said they didn't have time to clean it. I hope it's not too bad. I'm like, it just literally as long as it is a room, I'm fine. Which basically is all that it was. It was, well, I mean, they're always like just a room. That's basically what you get. They provide housing for you. I'm sorry, I'm glossing over a lot of details so if you've been in EPIK, or if you've been researching EPIK, then you know what to expect. But if you know nothing about this, then you're probably like confused, because I'm not doing a very good job of telling this story. But I'm sorry, there's so much information. My brain is getting overloaded even right now. But anyway, the way it works with these English teachers is like, if the school needs a new English teacher, like the school provides housing for the English teachers usually. And then if they need a new English teacher because the last one leaves, then like the last one moves out of the apartment, and then the new one moves into the apartment, and like the apartment is just kept by the school. And usually the person that just left will leave behind things, like it will be somewhat furnished. It should be somewhat furnished because of your contract. There are certain things that your contract states that you should be having in your apartment. But then also things like dishes and stuff. It's like you probably have those because the last person left them behind because they just are like going back home or something, and they're not going to need to bring plates with them, But I get into my apartment, and there are no dishes. There's not even a pillow on the bed. And there actually wasn't even a desk, which is something that my contract stated I was supposed to have, and I didn't have it, but I was like, whatever, I can't right now. Because I actually ended up moving out of that place because they were like, we don't actually think the place that you're going to be living in is very good. Because like the head teacher changed, so the new head teacher, which was my co-teacher, was like, I don't know why they were making those other people live in that place. It's not very good. I want you guys to be living in a better place. And so I actually did move out of that place. And then I just got myself a desk. But basically, I had to go and walk like 15 to 20 minutes down the streets of Gwangju at nighttime in February to go to the store and carry back home a pot and plate and bowl and pillow and whatnot, like, you know, the bare minimum of what I would need to be able to just get some food in my stomach and have a place to lay my head to rest that night. Ridiculous, just crazy. So I'm here, guys. I'm finally here. I did it. I made it. But I haven't really started my job yet, or like I saw my school for like 2 seconds, because it was an English center that was part of, like, it was based in an elementary school. So they had one teacher, one like foreign teacher like me, that was the regular English teacher, like in terms of what I was expecting to be when I signed up for the EPIK program. So that person was through EPIK. And then there was me and 2 other teachers that were specifically employed at the English Center. And it was still in the school. Like, it was just its own little like section of the school. So I did still work in a school, but I didn't work, my classes weren't to be teaching the way that most people that go through the EPIK program teach. And EPIK didn't help us manage anything anymore. Only our co-teacher would help us, which my co-teacher was probably the best co-teacher for me that you could have. Like, her personality was perfect for me. But anyway, once again, this video is not about those things. There's one last thing I have to talk about, because it was just like, you would think that I'm there and I'm done and I made it. And so now finally this whole process is complete. It's done. It's over. And I can rest and just like do the job, right? But it's not really, because I got my banking set up, but I still have to make a visit to go to the immigration center to get my ARC, which is your alien registration card. And I can't get my phone set up until I have an alien registration card. And you also can't do any sort of online banking or online purchasing. You can't order anything off of the internet until you have an ARC card and then a Korean phone number. So I still have to get my ARC card. So my co-teacher sets up an appointment and we go to the immigration office during school one day. We get there and, well, what do you think happened this time? It was closed because it was lunchtime. So we drive back to school. Everyone's like, wow, done already? I'm like, no, it was closed. We're going to go back later. So we go back later. We're having the appointment. My co-teacher's talking to the person behind the counter. You know, they're like getting my papers done, blah, blah, blah. But, there's a problem. We're missing a paper, so we have to leave and go back to the school, and she has to print off another paper, and then we go back again. And then finally it all works out, and that was done. And I won't even go through how many other times I had to try to set up things the way that you have to set up things in Korea, with all of the verifications of like your identity being verified, and how it literally never worked any time for me. Let's not go through that. Let's just end this with, I hope it was somewhat followable to all of you guys. My journey and adventure through applying and then getting to Korea through the EPIK program. And so that's where I was for a whole year when I told you guys that when I came back, wink, wink, like I was wink winking when I was saying it. I'm not wink winking now. When I came back and I was like, maybe I'll make a video about saying where I was for, I didn't even say a year. I just said for an amount of time. It was Korea. I was in Korea and I was teaching English. And once again, this video isn't about anything else, about what I thought about it, whether I would do it again, why I'm not still doing it, anything like that. All I'll say is that the specific circumstance that I was in, I chose to not renew, but I did really like it there and would absolutely go back. This video was literally just for me to be able to tell how insane it was, the number of things that went wrong with my journey. Like, I've told it to people, like other people in EPIK, like my other teachers that I worked with and stuff, and they're always like, I cannot believe that that is real. Like, I cannot believe that that many things happened to you. So I just wanted to share it, but I know I kind of ranted and rambled and glossed over things. So I hope it was kind of easy to understand, but that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. Bye-bye now.